In this video, I'm going to teach you that salvation is not only an individual experience, but it's also a social experience.
That's like celebrating Hitler. Okay, I'm dead serious about that. It's not good.
Let's get to it. Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lionel, and I've spent the past 24 years as a pastor, teacher, and public speaker. And today, I help high-ranking officials understand the intersectionality between faith, religion, and culture. And this topic today is relevant because anyone can use Christianity and this terminology to sell books, to sell tapes, to build buildings, even to get elected into political office. When we talk about the term salvation, it's important for us to get an understanding so that we're all on the same page about this whole terminology and this whole business about salvation. Salvation is a Christian's understanding when a person comes to faith in Jesus Christ. But there's also another more holistic understanding of salvation. The terminology for this video means wholeness or completion or protection from harm. And that's the terminology we're going to work with today because that's important. So let me break those down right now. So in the liberationist framework, salvation is understood both as a spiritual process and a social process. So salvation includes the transformation of unjust societies that perpetuate inequality, poverty, and injustice. When we talk about how salvation is not just an individual experience, but it's individuals that are touched and saved by this message of Jesus Christ, then take that message into the world and begin implementing change in the world. So it's a faith that grows from the internal perspective, one of internal salvation, but it plays itself out in the real world that we live in today. So it's impossible for a person with this perspective to have a true religious experience without that experience going out into the world. So it's almost like lifting weights. When you lift weights, not just for the sake of looking good, although that's fine and dandy, but we lift weights to be stronger. In other words, there's a practical application for why a person lifts weights. And so in a society where there's injustice, or they're in a society where there's poverty, in a society where there are a lot of social ills, that experience now permeates through them and to the community surrounding them. It is that individual's responsibility to see the things that are wrong and to adamantly make them right. So then one becomes not just a bystander, but a participator in making the world a better place. If we then understand salvation with the perspective on creating wholeness, not only within ourselves, but within our community, that changes the whole trajectory of what the church's mission is. So the church mission then is not just for individuals to have a personal religious experience, but now the church mission becomes to reconcile the world to a place of wholeness, to reconcile communities to places of wholeness. When you think about Jesus, for instance, his message and method was not only about how an individual can change, but it was about changing the system, particularly the religious system that put barriers between God and the people. Because the ultimate goal of religion, or the ultimate goal of spirituality, is your connection with the world around you. So this is paramount in understanding what the church mission is, what salvation really means, and how it works itself out into the world, mainly and primarily as a spiritual entity and a spiritual force for reconciliation. Salvation with this framework prioritizes liberation of oppressed and how Christian communities are called to actively challenge systems of dominance. And those systems can be racial, economic, or political. This is one reason why capitalism is an issue. Why? The simple aim of capitalism is profit in and of itself. This framework is trying to say to capitalism that there are some injustices that need to be addressed, right? Because it evades, if you will, the human factor and how one should view an individual, not just for profit, but an individual as a child of God who is created in the image of God, that has value and deserves to experience justice. So emphasis on justice as central to a salvation. This aligns with the framework. So it also critiques systems that perpetuate exploitation and dehumanization. This concept then of salvation, we're not just talking about individual salvation. We're talking about redeeming social systems. And this is not socialism. But this whole concept is saying all we're trying to do is make sure that while we're in the business of making profit, we're also in the business of maintaining humanity. What's in the best interest for everyone, giving everyone a fair place to play in this world. This liberationist view of salvation requires that we really deal with oppressive systems and that we promote those things that are good, right? Those things that are healthy for everyone. Making the world a just place is an essential component with this viewpoint of salvation. Now, if this content is helping you, or at least giving you a different perspective, go ahead on and subscribe. And if you want to know more about this, or if you want to hear another perspective, or if you want to engage me in this conversation, just make a comment below and I'll be sure to respond to your comment. Here's what we're really saying with this concept. Is salvation is a reconciliatory process. And it really means that salvation's purpose is both to bring you back in reconciliation with God and with others. So it's about restoring right relationships between people and addressing systematic oppression at the same time. So salvation then involves both building communities of equality and justice and mutual love, and particularly where there are oppressed people who have been broken in their relationships because of injustice. Think about apartheid in South Africa, right? Instead of Nelson Mandela coming back from prison after being locked up in prison over 20 years by his oppressors, he decided forgiveness instead of retaliation toward his oppressors. And so what he wanted to do was not to demonize his oppressors, but he wanted to demonstrate that in order for us to get beyond the cycle of violence, the greatest expression of Christian witness, or the greatest expression then of human witness, is to not repay evil for evil. Jesus said this in the Gospels. He says, Matthew chapter 5, Jesus talks about turning the other cheek, going the extra mile, not returning evil for evil. These are all concepts that can be used when relationships are broken in order to restore them. So if your personal relationship or your love relationship is broken, you can restore through forgiveness. So what we're trying to get at here is that there's dignity and human worth in the individual. And that the way to get beyond being hurt, especially for those who have been dehumanized by systematic oppression, salvation then brings both the potential for personal and communal healing, moving beyond individual piety, that is, I'm just being saved because of myself, but now addressing the flourishing of a full community. And this is what Catholics call, or what the Latin word imago Dei means, the image of God. Each individual is birthed or created or made in the image of God. And because that individuals are made in the image of God, they are worthy of being respected, of having the rights to have a working wage, to stay in communities that are not flooded with violence, to not be treated unfairly. All of the civil rights and social rights that we've experienced in American culture over the past 60 years have, as its essence, this whole concept that each individual is created in the image of God. And because they are created in the image of God, they are deserving of being treated fairly. So what are we saying? We are saying here that how we treat others is the most telling sign of our genuine Christian understanding of salvation. So when we talk about holistic salvation and holistic salvation, what it really means, that salvation is both the spiritual and the social. It involves personal reconciliation with God and with others, and it requires that we participate in transforming unjust systems. So it's not just about social service, but it's about social justice. It's not just about giving to the poor, but it's also about addressing the systems that cause for poverty in the first place. So it prioritizes the liberation of oppressed people. It aligns with God's concern for injustice in the world and requires that you and I participate in solidarity with those who are marginalized in communities. We've also talked about reconciliation as wholeness, and salvation is a complete process. It restores human dignity, the imago Dei. It aims for holistic reconciliation between individuals, community, and with God, and it aligns with challenging societal divisions that creates systems of injustice, okay? Now I want you to stick around for the next video because it's going to give you even more perspective of what it means to be a Christian and how it will cost you something. It will cost you your very life as it did for Jesus. I want you to watch the next video right here that's going to teach you more about what it means to be a Christian. Salute. I'm out. Peace.